I'll go back to this. And then we'll just bring it all the way up. Really bad. Oh, it's not the same, you know.
That's right. So you ask why it's not Dina to Machus Dina. But more why it's Dina to Machus is only on the Choshim.
It's only when the government upgrades.
No, but if the government keeps it, it's one thing, but they themselves don't.
Exactly.
No, also there's no Dina to Machus unless it's Choshim Mishpat. Don't have Dina to Machus, yes.
I'm driving 60 miles per hour.
Only price Choshim Mishpat. Money.
I went to the barber today to test my eyesight.
Yeah. I want to see what there.
After Dafka Face about 10 lines from the top, we're discussing a bolt. There are many different kinds of bolts. We discussed yesterday a few. One which is in the shape of the top of a circle, one which is attached to the door. So it goes like this. Omar Yehuda Mashmur. Halacha.
Where is it?
Omar Yehuda Mashmur is 6 lines from the Mishnah. Omar Yehuda Mashmur halacha Rab Yehuda b'nigra. The halacha is like Rab Yehuda when a bolt is dragged along the floor. Then it is mutter the Beis Hamikdash, but ad mutter the rest of the country. It says only if it's tied to the door. If it's tied to the door frame, it doesn't work. It's difficult to understand. The should even say when the bolt is tied to the door, people realize it's for the sake of the door. When it's tied to the door frame, then it's not. It says Tavla. Tavla went to a place called Mechuzah. So this bolt it was tied to the frame of the door. He said it's okay, even though it wasn't tied to the door itself. As well, there it was a very strong rope attached from the bolt to the frame, and therefore it was hanging in the air with the rope. So again, so it comes out so far, you've got 2 ways it can be mutter. Either if it's attached to the door, even if it's not a proper rope, that means it has to be a rope, but it doesn't have to be a strong one. It doesn't have to be one which could pull it up. Or if it's attached to the frame, but it's strong enough that it can be pulled with the rope. He used a reed to tie the bolt to the door. So Rashi explains that this is a 3rd level of rope. You've got a strong rope, a medium rope, and this is something which would snap it instantly. A reed, it's like a grass. All together, and therefore it is forbidden. Nikmaz mouth. What's nikmaz? Here I've got Thurs explains it nicely. If you look at it, it's the second new Thurs on the page, but it's like Thurs got a bit from the day before. Nikmaz mouth pirush. Ad hashtav ayik shaskupuk boya vein achoy nikmaz lots. Hashtav boya achoy hoylech ad shenichnas v'nes v'karka v'tomit tfele boyno. You've got 2 kinds of bolts. A bolt is used, it's a little bit like you have like at the bottom of a door to keep it in place. Now, most doors, in the olden days at least, there was a frame. There would be a hole in the frame, and then the bolt would go from the door into the hole of the frame, but it wouldn't actually go into the ground. Nikmaz is referring to a bolt where it actually goes not just through the frame, but it actually goes into the ground itself. There's a hole in the ground which the bolt goes into. So that is much worse. So Rose says, what's it doing by nikmas? Says, well, Omar, Yosef, mighty boile, what's the shaila? Did you not know this? Why said nishmat? If it fell off the door, osa, but nikmas mutter. That means if it's nikmas and it's attached to the door, it's mutter. Rabbi Yodoma nikmas afishe in nishmat osa. If it's nikmat, it is osa. Even if it's attached to the door, since it goes into the ground itself, it's considered boina. So if you've got a bolt that doesn't just go into the door frame, but it actually goes into the ground itself, it is awesome. That's how we pass. So if you've got a bolt that goes literally into the ground, it is awesome to use it on Shabbos. Oh, very good. You have a gate and it's got like a ground and a hole in the ground with a metal piece there. Except that there, you could argue that's literally part of the frame. I'm talking about like there where it's like literally it goes with the frame. But let's say you take a separate piece of metal and you use it to go into the frame, into the gate and into the floor. That would be awesome. That's the best way it's not connected. Then that would be a problem. What?
You can't pull them out.
Even if you can pull them out, it is part of the gate. It's like that's right. If you get a piece of metal, which like a bar, where you can literally put it in, then it is awesome. Says the Gemara like this. Also, if you made a handle to the bolt, what's the mile of making it a handle? Then it's not mechzika boina. It doesn't look like building when it's got a handle. Because everything that makes it look like not a building material makes it less look like boina. It's similar to our Mishnah said that in a buchna, which we said that if it's got a gluster, if it's got a bowl at the top which you can crush spices with, it is mutter. If it's got a handle, it's the same as a gluster, same as a semi bowl at the top, and it is mutter. Ahu shavisa. There was this beam. They have a be'ah pedos, which was in the house of pedos. They have a madlulo be'asol. 10 people were required to pick up the beam to lock the front door. Right, the shodula adasha, and they used it to block the door. But it didn't forbid it. It's considered a keli. So if you know, I would look at the next Thurs, Ahu shavisa. We talked once about this. Are you allowed to move your cloak cupboard? If you remember, we saw it's machlikas in the Gemara. You're allowed to move something which is very big, which nobody ever moves. Here we talk about a beam that to lift it up required 10 people. Why did the Gemara there talk about this? Also a big barrel, which was very heavy, and Rava forbade it. And here we're talking about a beam which requires 10 people. How much can a normal person carry? Does anybody know?
The weight.
It's a Gemara. Go on some hedgehog for me. You can carry 40. You can carry about 600 liters, about 600 kilo. You can't.
600 kilo.
You can't carry 600 kilo.
600 kilo. No way.
That's
660 maybe.
the Gemara says that the Meraglim.
Bench press maybe 120. Yeah, 60. 3 sacks of. No, you can bench press. I can do 600. 600 I can't.
The Gemara hedgehog says that each one of the Meraglim carried 1,800 kilo.
They were giants.
How many kilos 40 star?
Yeah, you're right. Okay, the Gemara is referring to, as you say. Yeah, you're right. Right. It's very heavy. Oh. Okay. Anyway, so the Gemara says like this: here, 10 people were required to move it, and it's mutter. And yet, in the Gemara in Shabbos, the middle of Thurs, it's not. It's also v'yeshlema. It's not normal to move it around. This beam, so if you look at this Thurs, I just finished reading the Thurs. Thurs tells us it makes a difference between if it's the normal thing to move it around or not the normal thing to move it around. So if you've got a very, very heavy beam, it takes 10 people to move it. But since it's normal to move it, that's how you close your front door. It is okay as long as it's a keli. But if it's not normal to move it, then you're not allowed to move it on Shabbos. And we've discussed this many times. Mishnah himself, actually, I looked at it again today just to refresh my memory. He's more makel than I remembered it last time. Meaning, he says like this, that if it's a keli and you don't mind moving it, you're not scared it will break. Only you very rarely move it, it's still permitted. It's only if you're scared to move it. Let's, for example, you've got a big chest of drawers. You don't move it usually because it's heavy, but you don't mind moving it. There's no objection to move it, so then you're allowed to move it. But if it's something which you are reluctant to move it, like a big cupboard which you're reluctant to move, then it could be a problem. Okay. Says the Gemara, similar kind of story. Hayasita, that's the second wide line. It's a big bowl. That held an adriba which is 15 saw. 15 saw. He allowed people to move it to block the door. It's still a keli. That means as long as it's a keli, you're allowed to move it. It's only if it's not a keli. Okay. Tell us some of those brilliant ideas. The almost on the shmeda of Issi, but keep it out. Keep it out, but there's actually a picture. It's not a very hard picture. Basically, all it is arches. That if on the boats, what they used to do is you want to put a sail up, so you want to or cover to the boats. What you do is you put like an arch across, And then that way, it's one of the last pictures. So it's actually quite small to see. If you can see it, can you see it? Does Oscar not have a picture of it? Right, Oscar have a picture. Kippy Darbo. It says arches going across the boat. Now, what's the problem? Are you allowed to spread a blanket on top? Oh, that's a problem. Oh, how do you keep it Darbo? If each loop, what's it called? Each arch is a tefach wide. A tefach is considered an oil. Always a tefach is considered a tet. It can be too much mess, but many times. So it's already got an oil because the arch itself is a tefach. So when you spread the blanket, what are you doing? You're just making it more of an oil, but already was an oil. Or in Nami Ein tefach, if each arch doesn't have a tefach, but there's not 3 tefachim between each, and therefore what do you have? Lovut. That means you've got lots of little arches, each one's a centimeter wide, only a centimeter, not a tefach. But between there's less than 3 tefachim, then the mocha, maybe machter's a person, then you can spread it across. So this is a very important, this is how we pass them. You're allowed to add to an oil arai. You're not allowed to create an oil arai. So for example, let's say this would be an open air room, right? I want to spread a blanket across it because we want to, for example, it gets very hot in the middle of the summer. So you want to put a blanket across it. It's oil arai, it's not permanent. Mutter also. Right, let's say you're sitting on the beach and you want to put across you, you want to put a curtain on top of you. Mutter also.
It's awesome.
Where are you spending it?
So that was awesome.
It's awesome. Now, when would it be mutter? If there's already an oil. How big does an oil need to be? Either you've got an arch which is a tefach wide, or you've got a couple of arches, they're less than 3 tefachim apart, so then you've got lovod. So let's say, for example, you've got washing lines across this room, right? Less than 3 tefachim apart. Can we put a blanket across? Yes, because then it's less than 3 tefachim. It's because a lot of them. So it's as if we've got a ceiling. So we'll just be moistif on the ceiling. Well, so now, I want to Taisa asks a kasha like this, that Taisa says, we'll come to it, we've discussed it a few times about lovud l'chumma. That means, remember we're discussing it? Discuss it again with somebody today. If you put strings across this room on Shabbos, have you created an oil?
No.
Less than not 3 tvachim apart. Less than 3 tvachim. Why?
It's not oil.
It's not proper oil. But if I've got strings which are less than 3 tvachim apart, and I put a blanket across,
Yeah, that's how you make.
again, let's go slowly. If I've got strings less than 3 tvachim apart, am I allowed to put a blanket across? What's the logic? Because I've already got a tent. So if that's the case, am I allowed to put up these strings in the first place on Shabbos?
Yeah,
Why?
so that's not proper oil.
So then,
What we build on Shabbos is not proper oil.
so therefore comes out, says Tosis, I've got a simple solution of building a tent on Shabbos. What you should do. You say we don't pass a lovud l'chumma. We only say lovud when it comes to a kula, not a chumma. So what you should do is put up strings less than 3 tvachim apart. You've not made an oil. And then afterwards you can say, well, now I've got less than 3 tvachim apart, put a blanket across. Tosis leaves it as a kasha.
Do both on Shabbos.
Do both on Shabbos. If you remember, I'll remind you, because I spoke to it like this. Somebody built a sukkah, and they had saw the kid say for the rule of the council was if you've got a chazak of a sukkah, you're not allowed to build on top. Somebody put washing lines out across. So the Rav Paskin, I'll never forget this psak, that what? Really, I don't want to forget it. That even though there's a taz that holds you can't sit underneath it, since most of the poskim hold you are allowed to sit underneath it, so if he's allowed to put his strings across. Why? Because we don't say lovud l'chumma. What does that mean we don't say lovud l'chumma? You should write it down in your freezer now because we're out of space in your fridge. What do you mean you can't write, don't say lovud l'chumma? What do you mean don't say lovud l'chumma?
Because
Lovud is as if it's all joined up, so you've got a wall.
it doesn't have a sucker because it's washing lines.
But we don't say lovud l'chumma because only when you need lovud it is lovud. If you don't want lovud, it's not lovud. So he kept his washing line, but the person sitting underneath couldn't sit in his sukkah because he was choshesh for the taz, so he lost his sukkah. Do you understand what it means we don't say lovud l'chumma?
That's too bad about that.
So he's lost his sukkah.
That's because you have a
But I'll just explain that Ikka is not the sukkah or not. The Ikka is, do we say lovud l'chumma? Many times if you go to Rav before sukkah, so many times they'll be discussing, they'll go to Beis Soivor, where they're arguing about Halchas sukkah, they'll be arguing, do we say lovud l'chumma or not? Says Tosfos, Rashi here in this sukkah writes, You do not say lavud lechumah. You don't say lavud lechumah. Lavud is a color. If I was to say to you, look, I made you a ceiling. Here, I made you 3 strings and the rest 3 tvachim apart. I made you a nice ceiling. Would you pay me? No. You'd say there's no wall here. It only looks like a wall. So the color, it could be a wall. So therefore, we don't say lavud lechumah. But this, if you don't say lavud lechumah, says this, I have a solution how to build a tent on Shabbos. Put strings less than 3 tvachim apart. You don't say lavud lechumah. So I haven't made a ceiling. And then afterwards, put a blanket across because you've already got now a lavud. Yeah, but it comes out. The Thurs is saying that it comes out that not like this Gemara that says that you're not allowed to. So Marshal says that who told Tosfos? This is a very interesting Marshal. That who told Tosfos that you can't, that it's mutter to build a house in stages. Let's say building a house requires a certain measure, and you put one pebble at 9 o'clock, another pebble at 10 o'clock, another pebble at 11 o'clock. What would it then be? You'd be chayav. Why? Oh, each time I never did anything of reality. It doesn't matter. Over Shabbos, you built a house, you built a wall. Says the Marshal, the same thing over here. You're right. When you put the 3 strings across, you did nothing wrong. When you put the blanket over the strings, you also did nothing wrong. But the soft calls soft on Shabbos, you've created a tent. So therefore, you've done this. He asked us to cash on to it. It's a complicated cheshbon if you think about it. It's very exciting because it's got a lot of ramifications. I'll tell you where it's got another ramification. It's complicated, but it's kedai to hear. A lot of people, when they have a loft, they have a Velux window. You know what a Velux window is? Anybody know what a Velux window is? It's a window that tilts like this. So this bin Shaila bin Astain, Dunna once got involved. This big Shaila, Rosh West Time got very involved in it. Is somebody came up with an idea to make a sukkah. How will I make a sukkah? Put schach on one side, schach on the other. Keep the window on the slant, and then I've got a sukkah like a steep underneath the Velux window. Came along somebody else and said it worked out. There's less than 3 tvachim between the window and the frame of the window. So if you say lavud lechumah, so therefore it's as if you've got the ceiling across, and then if you haven't got a sukkah,
You do say lavud.
that's a big problem. Yeah,
That would have to be 3 walls near that window, though.
if you're up to 4 amas in all directions, you can make yourself. Okay, this is a big shadow. Do we say lavud lechumah or not? Okay, let's see. You want to show the sides? No, well, okay. Right. Says this. Let's see the Gemara inside. So you select this. If there's a tefach or there's less than 3 tvachim, you can put a blanket across. If not. My tama moisav It says a very similar story just to back it up. Hadu dichri. Somebody had some goats. He had some goats. To be a mama boyutula in the morning, during the daytime, they wanted shade. It was hot for them. But at night, they wanted the shade off because they want to be able to breathe. So what should you do? How can you sort out these? What would you do for them? What would you do? In the daytime, they want the shade. They want a blanket across. They've got a pen. They've got a field where these animals live, and you want to put a blanket across during the day to keep the sun out. At night, you want to take the blanket off. Mutter asa. What would you say? Well, if you take it off completely, then you can't put it back on, because if you take it off completely, so then you're putting an oil on the Shabbos. So at night you move it up to tefach, leave a tefach covering the pen, and then in the morning you can stretch it out. So he said, also you'll take a cloth, a sheet, and wrap it around the tefach, and leave a tefach overhang, leave a tefach covering. And the next morning, you can spread it out. You can put it across. Then it's only a moisiful and then it's mutter. So if you've already got a tefach, let's say, for example, this is the room where animals live. So you put it till here, tefach, and then you put it across. Big machlokas is showing him what happens if you don't leave it open a tefach, but the roll itself is a tefach thick. That's the machlokas is showing. The chayyim should be okay, but it's not, because you've not got a tefach as a tent, you've got a tefach as a roll. Okay. You're allowed to set up a curtain on Shabbos, and you're allowed to take it off. Why? Because there's a difference between a roof and a wall. Chazal were more machmir legabe a roof than they were about a wall. A roof is considered already a binyan straight away, right? So, for example, as we talked about yesterday, putting 2 chairs, a blanket across, that's a problem. But walls, a curtain around the room is much more mutter. Kilas chasanim. Kilas chasanim is a bed which goes like this. Now it's very good to get a picture in your mind very clear. Kilas Chasanim was not a 4-poster bed,
Like
a
a tent,
2-poster
like a
bed.
tent.
Like a tent. Mutter the focal this with Shabbos, you're allowed to set it up and take it down on Shabbos. You're allowed to make a Kilas Chasanim. What do you say? Because it's not got a tefach roof. Very good. It's got no tefach roof, so it's got no roof. Comes along, Rav Shishis Davidi limits this halacha of the 2-poster bed. By the time it's finished limiting it, it's kemat impossible to set one up that it should be mutter on Shabbos. Why? As Shai pointed out, the idea is that if there's a tefach roof, it's no good. So if, for example, it goes up, and then at the top there's a tefach, mutter or asa? Asa, because you've got the top of a tefach. What happens if within 3 tefachim of the top, it gets to be a tefach wide? Since within 3 tefachim is considered all one thing, so if the last 3 tefachim before the top is a tefach wide, it's also no good. So it mustn't be a tefach at the top, it must be flat a tefach. There must be a tefach between the 2 walls within 3 tefachim. And even more than that, if there's a tefach at the bottom, that means from side to side, there's 2 tefachim, meaning there's a tefach on each wall, like this goes up to a tefach from here to here, and a tefach from here to here. Since a wall which is tilting a tefach is also considered the roof for tefach, and it's also no good. So the bed has to be how wide? Less than 2 tefachim. In fact, Rashi, it's impossible to have a bed less than 2 tefachim. Answers Rashi that you'll do it as zigzag, and in that way you'll make a few curtains going up and down each time less than 2 tefachim. So then you've got no tefach at the top, no tefach within 3 tefachim, no tefach from the bottom side. And then it is okay. But if you've got anywhere a tefach roof, it's no good. Let's see the one. There's no tefach on the roof. If there isn't within 3 tefachim a tefach. Also, it's also. There isn't a tefach of sloping. The slope of a tefach is like a tent, and therefore it's no good. So if you look at them, actually, my Rashi, they've actually drawn a picture of up and down. Oh, that's this discussion. This is a discussion that if you do it zigzag, you've also got a tefach. Because if you say so, it says there's a raya, another raya that don't say lavud l'chumra. Because if you say lavud l'chumra, then you have between each one is less than 3 tefach, and then you've got yourself a roof within the zigzag. There's a raya we don't say lavud l'chumra.
The whole thing is like this whole command.
No, it's.
By the bed, because he's judging every little thing to be lavud, really.
When you say you don't say lavud l'chumra, what do you care about 3 tefach? Yeah, it means there's 2 kinds of lavud. There's lavud within 3 tefach, it's considered like a tent of 1 tefach. Yeah, it's obviously not within law. It's a very good question. I never thought of it. I like the question very lot. It must be that within 3 tefachim, it's not a matter of lavud. If it's within 3 tefachim of roof a tefach, so the idea is it's not because of lavud. It's considered that's the roof of a tefach. It's like one more shisha b'david. You've had this actually in more Shabbos. Sign a shoy. You're allowed to wear a hat on Shabbos. But Tanya also not allowed to wear hats on Shabbos. If it's got a tefach rim, you're not allowed to wear hats on Shabbos. Oh, and if you pull your coat a tefach over your head, it's also. And I'll give the hot water to anybody later. If you remember without looking inside the machlekes, Rashi tastes not a shot over here in this Gemara. No Ben, I know you're not feeling well. The Gemara says chosh b'rosh ask b'teir. We've got machlekes over here regarding hats. What's the machlekes Rashi tastes? It's brought down in the Mechaber and in the Mishnah Berurah. No? About wearing hats on Shabbos. Moshe is very worried about it. Oh, you said a 10%.
Whether you take it off or not. No,
come on.
15, 12%. What?
You're not going to take it off.
Rashi holds.
You're not taking them off when it's just rubbing.
Yeah, we're talking about are you allowed to wear a hat on Shabbos? The Gemara says, "Hold the mahadik if it's attached, or the mahadik if it's not attached." What's the machlekes Rashi tastes? Oh, Rashi says if it's firmly attached to your head, it is mutter. If it's not firmly attached to your head, it is asa. Why? Because it'll blow off and you'll end up carrying it. Says Tesis, no. Who's ever heard of carrying the hats? You wear your hat, you don't dare walk around. I'm just joking. Says Thurs, if it's a hard hat, so then by wearing a hat, which is a tefach wide of the rim, and it's a hard hat, so then you're walking around with a tent on Shabbos. Who's allowing you to do it? It's like building, it's like taking a house and building yourself a roof on top and carrying it. That's again if it's little hats. They're being machmir for this thesis. Now, shaking, if it's a soft hat, it's not a roof. Why is it not a roof? Because it's flimsy. So according to thesis, if you wear a hard hat, let's read the top. We did quite a lot of thesis today. We did already 3 thesis. The 4th thesis we're doing today. Let's just do the thesis inside. Top thesis could face of the day. Not bad to go around the just have a labishum oyalu. We're not concerned anymore about the tent. If you've got a soft hat, even if it's more than tefach wide, as long as you've got a strap underneath your neck, like if you become a Buckingham Palace guard, right? As long as it's got a strap underneath, that's fine. If you don't have the strap underneath, what will happen? If you don't have the strap underneath, it'll blow off and you'll end up carrying it. Oh, there could be a problem. If it doesn't get bent, we're near oil. Or if he's a krivin asun, you're not allowed to wear a hat on Shabbos. So you see, Tosfos says a hard hat on Shabbos, you're not allowed to wear. What? No, according to Tosfos again, according to Tosfos not. According to Tosfos, the problem is because oil is building on Shabbos.
When people don't wear hats, do use the Eruv
No, the problem has got to do with a hard hat. If you've got a hard hat at tefach, you've got to Mishnah brings this down. You can't wear a hard hat more than a tefach wide. That's a very big question. Why we do?
Any normal Borsalino is more than a tefach wide.
Is it hard?
No, okay, so
it's
like a building hat.
I have to tell you, I sat by Yomi and Rina, spent time talking about it, and he didn't know what to say. He said the Shiur Zaman used to discuss it. Yes, he used to wear hats. I said no, because they say it's flimsy. Don't know.
You know the Yerushalmi Hasidic hats, the hard ones.
Yeah, no, I don't know. Okay, so let's make a machol. Put upside. Very good. We've got a lot to do still. The Mishnah now talks about hinges. What's harder, if the top hinge falls off a door or bottom hinge falls off a door?
Top.
Very good. Much worse. Oh, could have. Oh. Now the Maisa, we've got many Mishnahs now. We make a chiluk between Beis Hamikdash and everywhere else. What's chiluk? Why is Beis Hamikdash more kuladik? Why do we like the ones Beis Hamikdash? Because reason, that was one reason. Another reason, to help the avodah. As I said, I was more emphasizing it, but to help the avodah. So if a hinge falls off, now here we have a machlikas Rashi and Tosfos again. I'm not going to Rashi Tosfos inside. I'm going to just explain it. Rashi understands this whole sugya is going according to the Mandama Yesh Binyan Bekelim. Tosfos understands it's nothing to do with Yesh Binyan Bekelim. It's got to do with Makabah Patish. Does anybody remember the difference between Yesh Binyan Bekelim and Makabah Patish? For example, so that's one nafkimina, but there's another nafkimina. I try to explain this very clearly like this. If I've got, for example, you know, so they have these posh cups where you make them flimsy, they're made for like to have like desserts inside, but you twist the bottom into the top and then you've got it. You buy them in the shop, two plastic pieces, twist them together. Any problem or not a problem? So I'm not going to pass because it's a thing, it depends. So like this, if you hold in binyan bekelim, if you hold yes binyan bekelim, you've got a problem, you're building a wall, it's no good. If you hold in binyan bekelim, there's another problem, makabah patish. So he said to us, what did I gain by telling me Ein Bidin Bekelim if the problem is Makabah Patish? The difference is Makabah Patish is only if the job is a skilled, it requires either effort or skill. Binyan is also even without skill, even without hard work. For example, if I build a wall, I can put bricks on. If I build bricks on Shabbos, even though if I make a wall around my garden, even if it doesn't require skill or hard work, it's still awesome. But Makabah Patish is the last thing that the worker does. If it's something very, very simple and very, very easy, then that's not considered Makabah Patish. Right. Is that clear?
I always thought Makabah was the last thing.
The last thing.
Finish off your tables.
Right, but it has to be a significant thing. If you're not doing something significant, it's not. So for example, when you talk about twisting these two pieces together, if you're chush for mandama like shoys for the mandama benim bekelim, then you're not allowed to do it whatever happens. If you're many persons hold, there's no problem in bekelim. So the only problem is Makabah Patish. Makabah Patish has to be either something which requires effort or skill. with these things, unless it's hard to twist it together, which sometimes they are, then there's no problem with Makiva Patish. Am I clear or not really? Says the Mishnah, you're allowed to put the bottom hinge in the base of Mikdash, Medina, not in the rest of the country, because there's no Kabina. In the top hinge, which is much worse, like all of you pointed out, it's us in either way. The top one is Mutter in the base of Mikdash, Medina. He's always more makeup. That in the base of Mikdash, even the top one, because it's only a Dvar Bonon. But everywhere else, you're only allowed to the bottom one, which even with Dvar Bonon is not awesome. Now, Rashi points out, we're not talking about any kind of door. We're talking about a door which you needed it. For example, what happened was you had a big cupboard full of levoina, or full of salt, and you need salt in the base of Mikdash. And what happened was the hinges come off, and now you're not going to be able to get access to your levoina. So then you're allowed to put the hinge back in. The hinge of a door, a box, a tower, a carriage, but Mikdash machzin. The Medina duichakin. You can't put it back, but if it came a little bit out of the place, you can push it back in. The top one, in case you might push it in firmly. If you did your chayav chatos. Rashi explains because of binyan bekelim. Because of binyan bekelim, you don't need to do it firmly. Binyan is your chayav, even if it's loose, even if it doesn't require extra exertion. So this is because of makar patish. According to everybody. Why? Because in the second half of the price, we're talking about buildings like a pit, a house, a corridor. These places, it's a proper house. And there, if you put a hinge in the door, you're mamish chayav chatos. So, for example, if you've got, let's say, a box on the table, and you put a hinge inside it, so according to the Thurs, there's no binyan bekenim. The only shayla you've got is makav patish. It's only chayav if you actually do something which requires, let's say, you put the hinge inside, where it requires a skill or a lot of effort to put the hinge back in. But if you've got, let's say, a wall or a door, which is part of the building, and the hinge is coming off, then there, since it's part of the house, even if you don't do it b'tkiya, even if you don't do it with firmness, you just put the hinge back in, you're chayav. For example, the Shabbos talks about the case where sometimes you have a handle. I don't know, bathroom, the children mess around this very lot. So the handle comes off, right? So you want to put the handle back into the door. He's choshesh for a chatos, because even though it doesn't require skill or hard work, but since it's considered part of the house, so it's binyan in the house, and binyan in the house doesn't need to care, it doesn't need to be firm. Even if you just do an easy building, let's for example, the door falls off, so you hang the door back on to the hinges. It doesn't require tremendous skill or effort. Sometimes it does. But let's say it's an easy one. So there's a problem, a real binyan. It's not binyan bekelim, and then you could be chayav chatos straight away. Okay, I want to get text. Machzin matir b'mikdash. You're allowed to put a bandage back in the base of Mikdash, Shavlei b'Medina, but not in the rest of the country. In B'tchilop, if it's the first time you put the bandage on, can osa, either way it is osa. So what we're talking about, what happened was a kohen had a bandage on. Why? Before Shabbos, he cut himself, so he had a bandage. So he took it off to do the avodah. Why did he take it off to do the avodah? It's a chatzitza. There was once a kohen gadol called Yisachar Ish Kfar Bakoi. Now what did he used to do? He wore gloves when he did the avodah because he didn't want to get his hands dirty. One time the king and queen had an argument. What's tastier, meat of a sheep or meat of a goat? So they decided to ask the kohen gadol his opinion. So he came in and he dismissed the question. He said, of course, sheep is better, tastier. How do you know sheep is tastier? The Korban use a goat. You're very close. Korban Tomid is only a sheep. If a goat was tastier, I would have used the king was very annoyed with him for this dismissal of his hand. So he told the executioner to have his right hand chopped off. He bribed the executioner and he had his left hand chopped off. The king heard about it and he had the other hand chopped off. So he lost both hands. And Moses says how lucky he was that he got paid up in this world, didn't have to suffer in the next, that he shouldn't have to get punished fully in the next world. So Maisa, Cohen had a bandage on his hand and he doesn't want to have a chatzitza. So he took his hands off. So he took the bandage off. Now, why do we allow him to put the bandage back on? Anybody know? It was on originally on Shabbos. He took it off because he wanted to do that void. Why do we allow it back on? Says the one Beit say till safe mishum tchilos. If we don't allow him to put the bandage back on, you don't want to take it off, and then you won't do that void. So they allowed you to put it back on, but in the rest of the Eretz Yisrael, you're not allowed. You're not allowed to put the bandage back on. What's the issa putting a bandage on? Either because it's ma'aser before, or because it's mamachik, because they often used to have cream. and putting a bandage on is a form of a machik, but it's therefore in the base of Mikdash you're allowed to return the bandage. Everywhere else you're not allowed to return. But to put a bandage on for the first time, it's also in the base of Mikdash. Why is it also in the first base of Mikdash? Because there's no need to be mad to it. Because when he took it off for the sake of the avodah, we allow him. But to put it on for the first time, why should we allow him? He never had it till now. So why wait? He didn't put it on Friday. Why should he put it on Shabbos? The should ask the question, what about Shavuos in the base of Mikdash? Oh, we said that Shavuos in the base of Mikdash is mutter. The answer is, most Rishonim said there's a couple of other answers, that Shavuos is permitted in the Beis HaMikdash if it's going to help the avodah. Here, when you never had the bandage on till now, to put on the bandage for the first time is not going to help the avodah, therefore we don't allow it. It says, well, a retir, this is talking about one that fell off. Not that you took it off, but it fell off. That's what's back on Shabbos. What's the difference between if it fell off or you took it off? When you took it off, you decide not to have it on. But when it fell off, you're allowed to put it back on. You must remember that. That's a halacha b'udan mishnah. A bandage that falls off on Shabbos. Does anybody know? You're allowed to put a plaster on Shabbos?
No.
It's quite a complicated halacha, but it's good to memorize it. I said it. You're allowed to put it on as long as you don't double over the plaster.
Why is that?
Because putting the plaster on top of a plaster is a kind of toifa. But putting it across the skin is okay. For lots of children, sometimes makes them feel a lot better because the plaster on. You have to be careful how you open the wrapper to do it. What?
The problem with sticky thing.
No, so you do it with your teeth. Yeah, you take off the things because of that. If it fell off, if it slipped a little bit, the matter if it slipped upwards, the matter. You're allowed to reveal part of the bandage and wipe away the wound. Here we're talking about this. You've got a bandage which is oozing pus. You're allowed to clear away the pus, and you don't take the bandage off completely, because if you take it off completely, you won't be able to put it back on. So you can move it a bit, clean it a bit. Move it that way, clean it a bit, and then put it back in place. But if you want to clean the actual bandage, you're not allowed to. Why? Because the bandage doesn't have pus, it has cream. Cream, to smoothen out cream is memareach. There's no ism memoreach on your wound, but there is this ism memoreach on your bandage. Oh my God, the halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda, that if it fell off, it is also. And it's only mutter if you moved it a little bit. But if it fell off completely, it is also. Only if it fell onto a cup or a bowl. If it fell onto the floor, even the Chachamim hold this also. Vashi said, I was in front of my father. Who was Vashi's father? Vashi. Just checking that you're still with. Vashi was standing in front of Vashi. It's a good person to stand in front. His bandage fell off onto a pillow. He put the bandage back on. Now, we said before it's machlokes if it fell off. Abuda says it's also common, say it's mutter. And we pass it like who? He said like Rabbi Yehuda. So, when it fell onto a bowl, it fell onto the floor, also, it is awesome. That it is awesome when it fell onto a bowl. I don't agree. And here we have a huge machlokes to show him. What does it mean he didn't agree? What did he not agree with? We have two different understandings. I'm sorry, I'm rushing it, but I'll try to explain briefly. We had the machlokes if the bandage fell off mutter also. We had the man the Omar that the machlokes is when it fell onto a bowl. If it fell onto the floor, everybody agrees it's awesome. That's what we had till now. Him and Rashi said I don't agree either. I don't agree that we pass like a Yehuda. I hold that we pass like a Chomim that it is mutter. And therefore, I don't care that it fell onto a bowl, fell onto a pillow, same as falling onto a bowl. I hold like the Chomim that it is mutter and it fell onto a bowl. Or different. I agree with you, Rabbi Yehuda, that it is awesome. But I don't agree that it is awesome. The machlokes is when it fell onto a bowl. I think the machlokes is when they fell onto the floor. But when they fell onto a bowl, everybody agrees it's mutter. So either way, he held that falling onto a pillow is okay. The question is only, is it because he holds like a Yehuda and he holds the machlokes is anyway fell on the floor but on a pillow it's okay? Or is it because he holds like the Chavis? Machlokes Rashlesis. Koshin nimo b'mikdash. You're allowed to tie a string in the base of Mikdash. If you've got a harp or violin and the Levim had to sing Shiur and the string snaps, you're allowed to tie it. I've lived in Medina. If it's the first time you try to make the string, either way it is awesome. If a harp string snapped, what's the advice to say? What do? You can't tie it. You can only make a bow.
Will it not undo?
Oh, the more discuss this, but not necessarily depends how well you could make a bow. But the more let's get the question clear. The Mishnah says if a thing snapped, that the Brisa says you can only make a bow. This is what Lord Kasha. What does Rabbi Mila say? That you're allowed to do everything you need to become a mitzvah. Machshivei mitzvah duichiles haShabbos. So if you need to go to the forest to cut wood in order to start making a fire, in order to melt the iron, in order to make a mila knife, it's mutter on Shabbos because you need to make a bris on Shabbos. The Chachamim say no, only something that you cannot do the day before, that is mutter, like the actual chatichas mila. But everything else, even bringing the knife, they hold, you're not allowed to. So if you, for example, leave the knife in the wrong place, you can't do mila on Shabbos. So the Gemara says, "Oh no, there's a blessed machshir mitzvah doich this Shabbos kosher. Now, but ain't doichin oinvo. You can only do a bow." Oh, very good. Of course, that. If we're going to this Rabeleza, machshir mitzvah doich this Shabbos, I feel like lechatchila nami. Why does the Mishnah say if it snaps, you're allowed to retire it? The Mishnah should say,
You can put it in without snapping.
very good, because he holds machshir mitzvah doich this Shabbos always. So even if it never snapped. You came on Shabbos, I want to make some music. I quickly make myself a harp. You take a piece of wood. I don't know how you make a harp exactly. You take a piece of wood, take some strings, tie them across. You should be allowed to lechatchila. It says, if you remember those machlis abidu whether making a bow is awesome in hatira or not. So it's according to Rabbi Yehuda that a bow is forbidden. So you might as well make a knot because there's no difference between a bow and the knot works better. According to the Chachamim, that a knot is awesome, but a bow is mutter. So therefore, we insist that you make a bow because a bow is an easy way of avoiding a sidiraisa. I don't understand you, Rabbi Yehuda, that says that you should make a knot because either way, a bow and a knot is both forbidden. A man, who is he going like? Topic of Kimon Aleph. Yeah, If he's going to shoot the Rabbi Lezer, he should even allow you to go lechatchila, even if it didn't snap, or go lechatchila to make the knot. And why is Mishnah talking about a case where it snapped? And according to the Chachamim, the Gemara didn't even need to finish off. Of course you can't do it because the Chachamim hold that mechshir mitzvah not doiches Shabbos. You're not allowed to make a bow on your harp on Shabbos. Lekasha Rab Shimon Rabbanon is a different Rab Shimon Rabbanon. It's a different machlek. It's a Tanya. Ben Levi shnifskalei nima bechinoi, where a string got snapped. Kosher, you can tie it up. If you make a bow. If you make a bow, like Shai points out, it will not make a good sound. If you make a bow in a harp, it has to be very taut. So a bow won't do the job. What you do is you pull the string through, you thread it through from the bottom, you drag it to the top, and you make a knot at the top. Or you drag it to the top. So we see clearly a machlikas tanoim. It comes out like this. Rashi works out there are three shittas regarding a mitzvah. Shittas chachomim is that only that which cannot be done before Shabbos is doiches Shabbos. So, for example, if your harp snaps on Shabbos, you're not allowed to do anything to Mechal Shabbos, because since you could have made the harp before Shabbos, you're not allowed to on Shabbos either. Even though now it's not your fault because it snapped on Shabbos, but since it's something that could be done before Shabbos, you're not allowed to on Shabbos. For example, shechting the common tomid is okay, but bringing the common tomid is no good. I couldn't. It doesn't matter. Anything which could have been done before Shabbos. So that's how we pass them, by the way. Shittas Rabbi Lezer is the other extreme. He doesn't care. You can do whatever you want before Shabbos. So anything that you could have done before Shabbos, you can do on Shabbos as long as for the sake of the mitzvah. And Shittas Rabbi Shimon is in between, that you have to do everything you can before Shabbos. But if something goes wrong on Shabbos, then you're allowed to do something about it. Because at the end of the day, I did what I could before Shabbos, and now it snapped. It's not my fault. Yes, they had to play the shiur. The Levim sang. No. Yeah, you're not allowed to play music on Shabbos. Like this. In the middle, what happens is that you need to knot it because it will make a very bad sound if you make a bow. But on the side, a bow would also work. So therefore, the Brisa which says you can make a knot is referring to. Sorry, the Brisa which says make a knot is referring to the middle because you've got no choice. The Brisa says make a bow is referring to the side of the harp. The side of the harp because you only twang the middle. You only make the noise in the middle. You don't make it on the sides. Therefore, the middle has to be a knot. But the side you can use a bow. Behemoths, we're talking about the middle. And in the middle, the only thing that works is a knot. But we're scared that what would happen is, if we allow you to make a knot in the middle, you'll end up making a knot on the side. And a knot on the side is not necessary. So you'll be Mechal Shabbos for no reason. So if because of that, they forbade you altogether. So we've got over here different explanations, the steer which in the Mishnah and the Brisa. The Eker the Kuda I wanted to point out was that that we've got 3 shittas in what you're allowed to for Shabbos, and we pass like the Chachamim that only that which you can't do before Shabbos. We're up to the Mishnah. Tomorrow is Friday morning. I want to get at the very, very least to the next Mishnah, if not more even further, because I'm not Shabbos. Shabbos going to have to a slightly longer Shiur, because we're only leaving a few lines for the Hadin Shiur. We're very, very honored to have Yehuda Steinberg. And Ben, we're going to miss you. Okay, we put up Zoom.
Send him a full package.
Send a full package. No, Shua's bringing up. You're bringing you're bringing the Rachavavov. You said yes. If you don't want, you should say so. Then you're happy to, right?
Yeah.
Do you have a car?
Don't have to be
I do. I think it's nice to have a caution.
Your car's as fast.
I don't know. I can never get his car too.
Yeah, I don't know why you're arguing. I'm scared of this.
That's it. You got the job. BMW.
I've already got a job.
No,
Very good. Okay, that's